Imagine spending your whole life building an empire, only to realize that your son's happiness might be destroyed by the wrong person. What would you do if you had just one chance to test whether his future wife truly loved him or just the wealth he stood to inherit? That's exactly the dilemma a billionaire father faced. And so, he made a decision that would shock his entire family. He disguised himself as a poor gatekeeper. What happened next left him in tears. The story begins with Richard Hale, one of the most powerful and wealthiest men in the city. He owned chains of luxury hotels, had business partners around the world, and was respected in society. Yet, behind all the riches, Richard had only one real treasure: his only son, Ethan Hale. Ethan had just finished his studies abroad, and now he was preparing to settle down. But what brought the greatest joy to Richard's heart was hearing that Ethan had fallen in love and was planning to propose to his girlfriend, Sophia. At first, Richard was excited, but soon a nagging worry began to haunt him. He had seen too many people in his world pretend to love for money. He had watched marriages collapse when true intentions came to light. And deep inside, he feared, what if Sophia didn't truly love his son, but only the fortune that came with being a Hale? Richard couldn't bear the thought of his son's heart being broken. But Ethan was stubborn. "Dad," he insisted one evening, "Sophia isn't like the others. She loves me for who I am, not for what you own." Richard wanted to believe his son, but doubt whispered louder every day. Finally, one night, as he stared out the window of his mansion, Richard made a decision. If he wanted the truth, he would have to test it himself. For the very next week, Richard disappeared from his usual circles. He let his business associates handle meetings and dressed himself in simple, shabby clothes. Then, with permission from the mansion staff, he took up a job in his own house, but this time, not as the master of the estate, but as the new gatekeeper. His skin was darkened with makeup, his hair hidden under a worn cap, and no one outside the staff knew his true identity. He even changed his voice, speaking with a raspy tone. The day came when Ethan introduced Sophia to his family. She walked into the mansion gracefully, her dress shimmering under the chandelier. Everyone greeted her warmly. Richard, now disguised as the gatekeeper, stood silently near the entrance, holding the door open. Sophia glanced at him only briefly, her eyes narrowing at his old shoes and patched uniform, before quickly turning her attention elsewhere. Over the next several days, Richard carefully observed Sophia. Sometimes, he would greet her at the door with a kind smile. Other times, he would offer to carry her bags. Each time, she dismissed him with little more than a cold glance. "No, leave it," she once snapped when he offered to help. "Just stand where you're supposed to stand." Richard's heart sank, but he remained patient. One afternoon, however, the true test came. Ethan was running late for a lunch date, and Sophia sat waiting on the mansion's front steps. Richard, still in disguise, approached her with a gentle tone. "Miss, it looks like you've been waiting a while. Would you like some water?" Instead of a polite answer, Sophia's face twisted with irritation. She scolded him, calling him useless, and muttered under her breath about how rich people wasted money on lazy staff. Richard felt each word cut deep, not because she insulted him, but because he imagined his son marrying someone with such a heart. But fate had one more twist. That evening, Ethan rushed home with excitement, carrying a small velvet box. Richard watched from the shadows as his son knelt before Sophia in the garden, opening the box to reveal a diamond ring. Richard's heart pounded, waiting, praying that she would prove him wrong. Sophia gasped, her eyes sparkling, not with tears of love, but with the glitter of the diamond. She hugged Ethan dramatically, her voice trembling as she said yes. Yet Richard, who had lived long enough to recognize greed, saw the truth in her eyes. He turned away, tears welling up, because he realized his worst fear had come true that night. Richard could not sleep. He wrestled with the choice of whether to tell Ethan the truth. But finally, he knew what he had to do. The next morning, he revealed his true identity. As the staff gathered, Richard removed his disguise, standing tall once again as the billionaire master of the estate. Gasps filled the air as Sophia froze in shock. Why are you dressed like that?" she stammered. Richard's voice was steady but heavy with sorrow. "Because I needed to know who you truly are. And now I do. You showed me your heart, not when my son proposed with a ring, but when you thought you were speaking to a poor, ordinary gatekeeper." Sophia's face drained of color. She tried to protest, to explain, but Ethan's expression had already changed. Pain, betrayal, and disbelief washed over him as he looked at the woman he thought he loved. "Is it true, Sophia?" he asked quietly. She couldn't answer. Her silence was enough. Ethan removed the ring from her finger and walked away, his shoulders trembling. Sophia left the mansion that very day, never to return. Richard followed his son to the garden, where Ethan sat with his head in his hands. "Dad, my heart feels broken," Ethan whispered. Richard placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his own eyes wet. "I know, son. But better a broken heart now than a shattered life later. Sometimes, pain is a gift, it saves us from a greater disaster." Over time, Ethan healed. Months later, he met someone else, a woman who treated everyone with kindness, from the gardeners to the waiters, never once judging by wealth or status. This time, Richard didn't need to disguise himself. He could see the purity in her eyes from the very beginning, and so, what began as a painful test ended as a blessing. Richard's tears, though heavy that night, became tears of gratitude. His son had been saved from a lifetime of false love, and instead, guided towards something real. Closing message, for viewers, and that's the truth about love, it cannot be measured by diamonds, mansions, or bank accounts. It is revealed in how we treat the people we think can do nothing for us. Remember this, the greatest test of character isn't how we treat the rich and powerful, but how we treat the ones society often overlooks.